Adderall here with Ash Dorothy. How you doing, Ash?
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ash Sharathi, and it has been, or it is the next year, man. Like we made it.
We did?
Is it the next week and the next year?
A bit of a crash and roll at the end, but we made it. Also with us is Strata. How's it going, Strata?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. Okay. Today we're going to talk about some stuff that we've kind of neglected since nullsec took a ton of time over the last 5 days. So we're talking about the Winder Nexus, and we're also going to review how that fits into the whole year's schedule of events and how CCP is looking at events these days. And no one better to talk about that sort of thing than Ash Dorothy, who keeps an eye on these, not only from a development point of view on what the game industry is looking at, but also what EVE Online is developing for, also what some of the target audiences are for that and why they would even develop in that way. And also as a player and how they work and what the reaction is. So we'll look at all that today with Ash Dorothy and Strata. We're going to be talking about events in EVE Online.
Right. So basically, the winter event just ended today, which is why we're talking about it today. Because now that it is fully over, we can kind of digest it, pull it apart, and look at what it represented. So let me pull up the actual article about it.
By the way, I was watching people stream it last night. Actually, they were all saying like, yeah, it's the last night, get in on it. And they were out there in groups. It was kind of cool to watch.
Yeah. Okay, so here we go. The Winder Nexus was a series of different things that were all happening over the course of the last pretty much month, which is one of the things that's noteworthy about it, which is that this event was way longer than previous events. Most of these live events usually last somewhere around 2 weeks, give or take. This was nearly a full month in which these sites were available. And there is some good reason why events are usually pretty short-lived. There's sort of a cycle of gaining understanding and mastery all the way to the exploitation side of things, that by the time an event is over, it's kind of welcomed that it's over. But this event was way more complex and kind of engineered than previous ones, and it gave a lot of different activities support for and things to do. And so I think that this event, as you said, up until the very last day, there were people that were having a great time doing it. So a few things, there were a couple of things involving this event that were outside of the scope of like the sites in game. For instance, there was 2 abyssal PvP arenas during that time. There was login events, the 13 days of Nexus, able to throw snowballs at people for skill points and all that stuff. But then there was the actual event sites itself, which is had a track, which I wish I had a screenshot readily available of it, where if you went into your agency, you would have the not only like a description of the event sites, but it showed you had up to 4 different tasks at any given time, and completing a task made a new task appear. And these tasks could be combat oriented, they could be mining oriented, they could be exploration oriented, and they could also potentially mandate being either in high sec, low sec, or null sec. And these tasks accumulated points, which went up a track. And as you went down the track, you unlocked different skins. And like halfway through, there was a cerebral accelerator, and at the end, there's like a bigger cerebral accelerator. A few things to note: the skins in the track all were bind on character when applied to it. So if you couldn't then sell them. So if somebody has the Eris skin or any like Dictor skin with the Aurora, that Aurora skin.
Mm-hmm.
If they have it on a Dictor, that means that they did this event. It was the only way to have gotten it. It's not something that can be bought or sold.
Or one of the 3 characters on that account did it.
Right. Yeah. You could apply it to a different character if you wanted to. You could do it on one character and apply it to a different character. But it's not like you can't just sell it on the market. If somebody has that skin, it means that they did this event. which was kind of interesting. CCP has played with this in the past. Most famously, there was the Shadow of the Serpent event, which was what brought us the Serpentis Dreadnought. And so it was this massive grind of tasks that took a lot of time to complete. And if you completed it, you would get one of these BPCs, which didn't quite work because it sort of burned a lot of people out. Like I didn't hear of anybody who actually completed that event all the way through and then continued to play Eve the next month. Like everybody who completed that event had to take a month off at least.
Yeah.
Because of how much it was.
Yeah, we laughed because we thought that's probably not the desired result.
Yeah. And then there's other problems too. Like now the people that are ending up earning this BPC are definitely not the people that are like running around that would use that BPC. So you have these like newer players that are like spending their time grinding up this stuff, and then they end up with this thing that almost just makes them into a target more than anything. So it could use some work, but
the Serpentis Dreadnought, is it the Vehement? Is it the same ship?
That is correct.
That sounds correct. Yeah.
All right. Gregorian's with us. Gregorian's with us today too, by the way.
All the Serpentis ships, besides the Daredevil, all start with V. So
got it.
Remembering which capital is which is hard.
Vanquisher's a Titan. Vendetta is the Nyx, basically, and then Vehement.
Yep. And then, of course,
is a Dreadnought. That's 3. That's it. Oh, there's
Vindicator for the battleship, and then Vigilant for the
cruiser. Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
The cruiser.
Another fun fact, which we'll get into in a little bit, is that there's the reason why the Serpentis equipment is so similar to Angel equipment is because the Angel cartel actually developed the Serpentis equipment. Serpentis are just a bunch of drug peddlers, basically. So they don't have a military wing of their own. So they hired the Angel cartel, which is something that we'll go into in a little bit when we talk about this year's events. So anywho, another thing that made this event interesting is, like I said, there was way different types of tasks that could be done. This has also been done before. In fact, one of the best implementations of this was a previous Frostline, which was the winter event, in which you went to these planets, and then there were like mining activities and hacking activities and combat activities. It was kind of fun to try to do like multiple at the same time or with different ships or whatever. So in this case, there were clearly defined different kind of areas where the mining area only allowed in mining ships to give them some sort of protection. And the hacking sites required very good, like 95 or higher scan strength. So that way you can't just slap a scanner on any old ship and just let it go. And the combat sites, obviously, like if you're not able to hang with the Serpentis, against the Sancha in these winter sites, then, or like the rats in these sites are designed to function like a player versus player fight, which means they take the same solutions as a player versus player fleet would. So if you take a team of like 5 to 6 players and you build them as any kind of like small gang cruiser or battle cruiser fleet, as long as you take some basic considerations into play of what the Sancha are willing to do, then if your fleet is able to like fight as a PvP unit, then you'll also be able to complete these sites. So very often I just expect, like I just say, hey, bring your best PvP cruiser and we'll be good to go. And if we have Logi, then that's great. But most of the time we just go with local tank, because, and this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand, is that events have gone through multiple iterations over the years. And this last, like since Invasions, we see a new kind of event coming out. I call it like the post-agency overhaul events. And they utilize the invasion AI, and the invasion AI is a level of sophistication above and beyond all of the previous rats. So invasion AI, for example, have an active capacitor, which means that you can energy nuke them, and it will turn off their secondary effects, like their reps and their E-War and stuff like that. They're also able to fly in formations and support each other in a much more sophisticated way than before. And they are impacted by E-War in a way that you would expect rats to be or a ship to be impacted. If you tracking disrupt them, they will come in closer in order to compensate for that. For example, they also do have some basic mechanics that are designed to kind of hard counter certain player behavior. So one of the more controversial is that a lot of times they'll deploy the rats. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't, where the rats can do what I call repositioning, where the rat can warp to about 400 kilometers and then warp back to whatever position that they want. So what happens is that if one of the rats decides that they have a target, but then that target is outside of range, rather than burning to them mindlessly and allowing them to be kited out, they will just reposition to get on top of them. So that counters a lot of more like super kitey playstyles, which is good because if you want them to be doing this in PvP areas, you want them to be brawly anyway, so that way you have more interesting encounters once the enemy comes in. A kitey ship or group would just leave.
The other aspect of it was they wouldn't scram you as far as, well, I never had an MWD,
Yes,
so I don't
they
know
do.
if they scram, but they would web and point you basically. So it enabled you to be locked down, and then therefore if somebody came in to contest with you, they would be able to get you basically. I mean, you could get out of the webs and the points, but say for example you're fighting against the battleship, which is the last NPC in the room. Number one, they hit pretty hard.
Yes.
But they webbed and pointed you at the exact same time, so it would take quite a few seconds to get out of that guy's point range. So theoretically, you could get in there and grab people. So there were some interesting PvP aspects to the thing.
Right, and they've been working on more and more on making these sites what I like to call PvPvE. They've been working on this for about the last year, which is PvE sites that organically evolve into PvP sites. So one of the things that they've been doing is showcasing more dangerous areas of space by putting the better rewards there, right? And they sometimes rotate, although they've kind of decided that low sec is more worth rewarding. When they reward low sec's behavior, they get much more out of it than when they reward null sec's behavior, or like by putting stuff only in null sec, as it were.
Why do you think they did that?
No, they've tried, like they've done it both ways. Like I've talked to them, and what I'm saying is that CCP feels more rewarded when they put the better rewards in low sec. They've found that putting the better rewards in low sec just makes better events, is what I'm trying to say.
Low sec is more of it's more accessible. Number one, it's a couple, it can be a couple jumps from high sec, so anybody can get there. So in normal means, it means it's more accessible for newer players or players in high sec. So they'll be going into low sec, so they'll be drawn there. Right. You don't have issues with people camping with bubbles and that sort of stuff. So people can't control it as easily. But it also is actually more dangerous, because if you had this in like somebody's sovereignty space or something like that, then it's actually going to be very easy for them to prevent anybody from, number one, running the sites, because they just have all of their friends there, and nobody else can get over there. They have to like burn 20 jumps through 0-0 to get there, so that's not very accessible. And and it would be very safe for those individuals to then run the site. So it just wouldn't be interesting in any way. So low sec tends to be the best place for the best rewards for events.
CCP also risks nullsec is so angsty about stuff that CCP risks appearing to favor one side over another, or one group over another, if they put sites in their region, even if it's because they're blood raiders or something like that. That being said, like the biggest thing is, low sec is less controllable. You can't have somebody just like it is more difficult for an organized group to seize something and ensure that nobody else has access to it. And to that accessibility note, one of the other interesting things about this winter event was that they put all of these metaliminal storms all over the place, and then they introduced a new type of filament that let you teleport to these metaliminal storms. So basically you had content on command where you could take 1 man, 5 man, or 10 man and just go to either high sec, low sec, or null sec. And this was incredible. Like, this worked so well because it was such a good idea where
the filaments got me doing a lot more of the event than any previous one.
Absolutely. You use the filament, everybody gets out there, and the cool thing is that as you're running the sites, you're getting more of the filaments. So what we ended up doing was, like, if somebody had to leave the group early, you could just hand them one of the high sec 1-man filaments that you guys picked up or brought along with you, and then they just went home by themselves, and the rest of the team was able to just carry on. This was an incredible way of getting people to get in and out of content. Because going to those areas are dangerous, which means that there's a lot of things to consider, and those things to consider end up being barriers to entry, even for people who knows how to solve the problem, right? Like, I know how to play the game, I know how to get to nullsec, but if something is in nullsec, the chances of me actually doing it is less because there's so much bullshit between here and there that I just may not get around to doing all of that stuff. But if I have a key that just says, hey, guess what, you're in nullsec now, or you're in lowsec now, then that makes it so that when I get given the task, because at the same time, remember, I've got that track with the tasks, and that task tells you, hey, you have to go to lowsec to do this one. And the problem is that these tasks don't seem to cycle. So over time, like, you can avoid a task but after a while, your task list will start to fill up with tasks that you've decided not to do.
Be that combat, mining, or exploration. So it was funny. I ended up doing the exploration first, and I was like, okay, this is pretty fun. I'm in a frigate. I'm not risking too much in terms of ISK. But then my thing filled up with combat. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to figure out how to do these combat sites. So I went and got a combat ship and did those. And then it filled up with mining. And I was like, okay, well, how do I do this ice mining thing? Because I'd never mined ice before. So it was an interesting, like, it forced you to go do things that were maybe outside of your comfort zone in order to progress with the system.
But that's my point. Once you were actually willing to do it, the act of getting it done was not hard, right? Like, yes, nobody wants to be, like, if you're a combat person and you've never outmined ice before, like, making you do that to maximize it is a big ask, which is why you can do it in high sec. You can do it with a frigate. There's no pressure in the actual site itself if you just need to do it to do the task, right? So if you need to just knock out your mining task, you can just knock it out and it's fine. You can move on. You just need to be willing to do it. There is an exception to that, which is that alphas couldn't do the mining tasks, which is interesting because it means that it could potentially represent a soft limit on the progress that an alpha character could make in this track.
Do you think that was intentional? I don't think it was, right?
I think it was something that they were willing to let happen, even if it wasn't necessarily intentional. Because if you think about it, all of the ships in the later end of the track are all Omega ships, anyways. They're dictors and stuff. And so I think that they accept the idea, because this has been true in previous things with these kinds of tasks or something like that, where it's like, yeah, guess what? An alpha isn't going to be able to do it all, or if they do, it's going to require more work or more teamwork to do it. And that's just what being an alpha is, man. Otherwise, being an Omega wouldn't mean anything.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. I mean, the thing was, the rewards that you were getting for the doing the agency progression thing, they're either, like, you have these boosters, which, number one, you can get the boosters from doing the sites themselves, so that they weren't locked out in any way. But the skins themselves were, that is the only way to get those skins, and they're purely cosmetic as well. So, like, doing those, like, see, for example, you could have not interacted at all with that agency progression bar and still made a lot of ISK. So you didn't have to go and do combat or do exploration or do mining if you preferred one or the other. But if you wanted those cool skins, then you had to interact. So it was an interesting, like, option, interesting idea where they didn't lock everything behind the progress bar. The rewards were for doing the specific site itself and weren't tied to as back to what you were saying about that Dreadnought event where you could get that BPC, like you had to basically finish the thing, or if you didn't finish it, your rewards were basically minuscule in comparison to what you would have made.
Right. In previous iterations, one of the things that they went a long time before you got between receiving rewards, or the rewards were not very meaningful outside of the main stages. This reward track really felt like a good rhythm of actions versus rewards. I felt like I was constantly about to hit the next milestone, and like continually checking off tasks, and then also checking off how far down the track I've gotten. It felt pretty good to go through that. That being said, it would be nice for there to be some sort of reason, like final reward that is based on total points accumulated. So that way somebody who finished the track within the first couple of days would be able to continue to gain points and have some sort of lasting feeling for it. Even if, and I've said this before, the events should become like a lasting record. Like I should be able to see how much I did or what I did in this event this year. Like they shouldn't have just taken it away off of the UI whatsoever. I should still have access to that track just so I can see that that's what I did. That'll always be what I did. And see a historical record of if you're going to have these point systems. So that way we could do a thing like a competition for who can get the most points beyond even what the track is. But it's interesting that you mentioned feeling rewarded even if you don't want to do the tracks, because the tracks are where like they're just skins, and if you don't care about those skins, then you don't care about them. A lot of people want to know the ISK, and this is another thing where CCP struggled for a long time to really make to understand the rewards for these sites. In the early days, sites were extremely rewarding, but partially because like in the first ones like Crimson Harvest, they were based around skill accelerators, which at that time were unheard of before. And so the idea of like being able to speed up your skill points was so big that it was like worth anything. This was of course before skill extractors and injectors as well. Over time, that hasn't become as big of a reward anymore. And so other rewards have been put in. This year, they've used the events to release a set of pirate implants, for example. The Nirvanas came from the Sancha. There was the Hydras from the Garistas, et cetera, et cetera. Each of the pirate factions kind of got to introduce a new implant during their holiday. And the Sancha have now gotten to release 2, because they released the Nirvana last January as part of the Dragonar Blitz event, and then this year they released whatever they had as part of this event. What was the implants this event?
Those things.
Capacitor recharge speed. Yeah.
Right.
So
right, capacitor.
But the problem is that in previous events, like the first couple of days, the events are super lucrative because these things don't exist on the market yet. But then it crashes out. And another thing is that like when it's all about BPCs or something like that, it's hard to turn things into a reward. So if you like me, I even gave this feedback, like as an FC, I've got this group of people, and we go out and we get like 300 million ISK worth of stuff. Well, I can't necessarily turn that all into value right away, especially since the act of the event crashes the market. So I have to just pay 300 million out of my own pocket and just eat the stuff if I want to give a payout right away. It's very difficult for like coordinated ISK generation, even though they need teamwork to work. And so what we've seen, especially last Crimson Harvest in October, and then now repeated here, this shift towards using overseers effects and other commodities to put the value in. So now about 60 to 80% of the value that you receive from these sites generally come from things that are commodities purchased by NPC buy orders, which means it doesn't matter how the market changes. It doesn't matter if 1,000 people run the sites. It doesn't matter if the markets all get flooded by the stuff, because the buy orders the NPCs will continue to buy them. It doesn't matter how many overseer effects drop. They will still be rewarding.
We can think of them as like raw ISK, right? Because they're infinite buyback, but that you have to deliver them. So there's an aspect of if you get killed with this stuff in your cargo hold, then theoretically you're a pinata for somebody else.
I wonder if we'll be able to see that on the end MER,
I'm sure
the
we
impact
will.
of this event when
definitely.
in the section for stuff sold to NPC buy orders?
Trillions. I'm thinking you're going to see a massive uptick because I think there were a lot of people running these. I think even there were these sites in 0.0, and people were running these instead of running normal ratting sites. So I think you're going to see a massive uptick there. Yeah,
It'll
it's
be
gonna
hard to see because, you're in the same category as sleeper loot, so it's hard to sometimes make a blip.
I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be pretty significant. We'll wait and see. I think I talked to some guys in my alliance who said they made like 20 billion in loot. So yeah,
Yeah, and that's the thing is that we had people, because of the way that it was organized. If you had a team of 4 to 6 people, even if they weren't very experienced, a team of 3 people I had 3 people that have a moderate amount of experience with the game. They're not newbies, but none of them were PvP FCs, to the point where when I took out a fleet, everybody wanted to come. But when I wasn't bringing out a fleet, people were really nervous about it because FCing in low sec was spooky. But eventually they started trying it out. And I know that there was at least 3 or 5 people that got together and they got some freaking work done, man. Because if you're willing to do it, was one of those things. It's hard. You got to be willing to do it. But if you're willing to do it, this event rewarded you. Those guys made a killing.
This event is which one?
The winter event.
This new one. This is Nexus.
This last one that just ended,
Yeah.
which CCP did say that they wanted this one to be additionally rewarding. So it's not every event in the future is going to be this rewarding. But the Crimson Harvest was also really good. I mean, it's maybe not 300 million ISK an hour good, but 100 million ISK per hour good, and that's pretty good. So at any rate, I wanted to show a video rather than us trying to go over all the different events from this year. CCP actually just did this in their thing, so I'm going to switch over to this and show a little bit of what's been going on. So these are the events that happened this year. There's probably more of them than what most people realized. Some of them we expect to repeat this year, some of them that we don't. The Guardians Gala, the Hunt, Crimson Harvest,
the Easter egg
and the
one.
Winter event.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the ones that we most expect to see come back. Dragonar Blitz is a little bit more iffy. Obviously, like the trading spaces, not so much, because that was, yep. And then the Winder Nexus. So these are the things that CCP identified as the events this year, and CCP is moving towards a more routine calendar of events, and so at the very minimum, I expect to see a return of the Guardian Gala, the Hunt, Capsuleer Day, and Crimson Harvest. I don't know whether or not we're going to see something in January, because last January we got Dragonar Blitz, and Dragonar Blitz was related to the Caldari have a terrorist faction known as the Templars Dragonars, who used to work for Tibus Heth, and we didn't hear about them for a long time, and then suddenly they were active again, and really it was also just kind of an opportunity for them to showcase the splinter faction of the Sancho that they've been playing with, called the Vamaksha Chorus. And so that event was focused on Lowsec. They focused it on Caldari Lowsec. It was Caldari because it was related to the missile buff that was being done at that time. So it all kind of thematically fit. So there's no real reason to believe that they're going to have a Dragonar Blitz this year. That said, a lot of the story that they've been building up in the lore for the last month has been related to the fallout or the after effects of the Jita 4.4 rework, which involves a lot of criminal activity, an attempted bombing of the mining facility outside of Jita 4.4, and a crackdown on various different pirate groups within the state. As there's unrest, the state was shown to be very, very weak during the Triglavian invasions, and they're kind of in this period of there's a lot of unrest within the state, and the state leadership is responding by cracking down on the populace. So the idea that maybe some sort of event might come out of that in January or something, or in the near future, is possible. and that would reflect, like that would tie into Dragonar Blitz because that was last January, but I'm not sure. That being said, the Guardian Gala, let me pull that up. The Guardian Gala is kind of like the February event. It's more or less the Valentine's Day event. The Guardian's Gala is focused on the relationship between the Guardian Angels and the Serpentis Corporation. As I mentioned, the Serpentis do not have their own military wing. Therefore, all protection, research, and development is done by the Angel Cartel, and specifically their subdivision known as the Guardian Angels. And every year they celebrate this by having a giant party. Last year, they put this in Wormholes as part of the From Wormholes with Love. Once again, there is a possibility that they will do that again. But during that patch, they were already introducing a lot of mechanics about wormholes. So unless they decide to do that again, then it may not necessarily be put there. But that being said, since they are just trying to have their party, and the Serpentis and the Angels are across two different areas of space, it makes sense that this focuses on wormhole space as an event, because they're hiding their installations in wormhole space or something. So it's probably unclear necessarily. I'm not 100% sure how the Guardian's Gala will show up this year, but chances are it will be the Valentine's Day event in some way, shape, or form. And then later on, we have the hunt. The hunt is the Easter event. I made jokes before about the Garista bunny. This was another one event that was really liked last year. We would go around and find capsules using directional scan, and then hunt them down and pop them. And from there, you would get a key, and then that key would allow you to enter into the insides of the sites. And it focused on like Garistus, Lowsec, and Nullsec. I imagine that the hunt could probably return this year in basically identical as it was before, maybe with a little bit of extra build out, like the winter event got this year, with like tasks and a track and more like structure around it. But the sites themselves and the core mechanics of it are pretty interesting. Another thing to note is that these events have also been related to mechanical changes that affect the world during these times. So, for instance, Crimson Harvest has now become the time in which loot drop rate is increased significantly. Last year or the year before, it was 100%. This year is 90%. The Yule Festival, the end of year festival, the winter event that we just had, last year was when we got heat filaments for the first time. The filaments that allow you to teleport into Nullsec. And so the winter event is now related to those filaments, especially through its connection with outer ring excavations.
Ash, can you go back to your face cam? I'll go ahead and hold the picture up.
Yeah. Oh dear, maybe. Hold on 1 second. Oh, there it is.
Well, we'll look for you in a second. Bingo.
All right. Yeah. So, at any rate, my point is that the hunt's mechanical change is that implants drop from people who were potted, and that had never been done before. But it was done for the first time. Usually, all implants are destroyed every time. Like when you pop a pod, all that's left is a corpse.
That's how I got my first Genealotion set. That event.
Right. So that's a big thing. Once an implant gets put into your head, it's in there. There's no way to ever get it out, period.
Even if you want to change implants, right?
Right. You would have to use a different clone. If you fill up your clones, then you're full.
Or you have to destroy the implants and then open that slot and then put a new implant in.
Right. So now, or during that event this year, there was a 50-50 chance on any given implant that it would actually drop. So this meant that potting people was valuable. And also it meant that if people wanted to, they could risk and try to salvage some of their implants out if they no longer wanted to have that clone during that time. But as we've seen, the Crimson Harvest and the Yule event both thematically echoed their mechanics last year, and so it's reasonable to anticipate that this, like the Garistas event, the Easter event, will become the time of year that implants will potentially drop from pods. Seeing that mechanic repeat itself again, I wouldn't be surprised.
Do you think they hold those mechanics for the events, like reserve them for an event? Or do you think they're testing the mechanic to see if they can integrate it into the game full time?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I think that in the case of Yeet filaments, for example, that ended up being such a big hit that they did integrate it full time. And then this year they had to think of something else to be like the next step beyond that to be the thing for the season. But I think that the point is that using the events as an opportunity to kind of cycle through extreme things, right? Like, it wouldn't actually be a good idea to make it so that drop rate is now 90%. But having that be true for 2 weeks out of the year is interesting. It adds texture and dynamicness a little bit to it. Makes it so that not every day is the same as every other day, which is really what a calendar is all about, right? And holidays are all about, there's a rhythm, there's a cycle to things. And so I actually really like the idea that, like, you don't always get your implants out of your egg, but if you really, really, really want to, you can kind of hold out and expect to be able to do that at this one time of year. Just like there are some things that you can only do in one area of space, or whatever. Just adds more texture. So beyond that, we have Capsuleer Day. Capsuleer Day is the 17th of May, which is the EVE Online anniversary. In universe, this has a presence in the form of the Society of Conscious Thought, which is the kind of the Jovian relic organization that is the people who brought us the Gnosis, the Praxis, and the Synesis, etc., and the Apotheosis. That this is like their holiday, which is why you often get things like the Praxis for the 5-year anniversary or something like that. Generally speaking, the golden ships, the SSCT ships, are related to the anniversary of EVE Online. And so Capsuleer Day, sometimes it has a thing in game. They've had conscious interruption in the past. Most of the time it's just a login event. But also the winter event you sometimes was, many years was only a login event. So if CCP is getting really into events, which it really seems like they are leaning more and more into it, it makes sense that they would use Capsuleer Day as a more regular event to give people opportunity to go hit fireworks and do all that kind of stuff. Which brings up a good point, that there has been a lot of minor events that also could potentially be turned into more major events this year if they wanted to. Each empire has their own founding day. You have the coronation of I almost said Jamil, of Catus the First,
Almost.
which is like September. You have Federation Day. Each of the 4 empires kind of had their own celebration, which this year was just like a login event and a go shoot fireworks in them. But as CCP builds a more and more robust event system, it makes sense that they may play around with this stuff more. And then finally, of course, we have the Crimson Harvest, which is the event that started it all in many, many ways, which is our Halloween event, which is hosted by the Blood Raiders, which there's an amazing scope video. I would encourage you to just show everybody the scope video like as it is. From the Crimson Harvest, but if not, then when you guys are done, go ahead and check this thing out. It is by far one of the most bizarre scope videos that have ever been produced. It depicts the blood ritual of Omir.
It was bizarre at the time, wasn't it? Like people were blown away.
Yeah, it was pretty jarring.
Let's see if I can forward to that. Here's the ceremonial place. They have captured people. You see them there in the middle. And then here's a dark figure of the vampiric leader and his nakedness. And so, of course, this is what they do, right? They
and the text, the vocals of that is a poem. Let me look it up. I can't remember what it's actually originally from.
We had Mike Azariah read it when we were doing our podcast when this happened. And I put music or a soundtrack to the Thriller in the background as he read it, because he read it in a big voice. So.
Oh man, I want that. No. This video is very old.
Yeah, this is 2015. Funny, these guys. It's funny because the animation is their heads drop, so you assume their body it was just drained of blood.
Yeah, the poem goes: "Bloody Omir ran away, hiding from the light of day. He made a base out in the night, far away from the Empire's might. Holders think that they're all safe, protected by the Empire's grace. Silly people, you should know, you shall reap just what you sow. Bloody Omir's coming back with monsters from the endless black. Wading through a crimson flood, Omir has come to drink your blood." Hi, Zed.
He's going to have a nightmare. Oops. Yeah, so all those holes there, they're supposed to be painted with blood, which is funny because then they made the Moloch, and it's like, come on, something the size of Manhattan, that's a lot of people. Even these battleships
these guys get a lot, like they extract whole planets. But that's the thing, like different blood is like, not all blood is created equal.
They really like clone blood, which means there's a great way to get Moloch amount of blood.
Yeah. If you've ever read the Empyrean Age book, it was the first book that came out about EVE Online. It really set up the stories of faction war between the empires. It starts out with a very dramatic first chapter about a blood raider going after an Amarian, important person. And it's just, it gets you right into the story. It's the best chapter in the whole book, pretty much. But it starts out with blood raiders and just what they can do. Just one inside of a ship can just tear it to pieces.
Yep. So my point is that while the events have changed over the years, the current iteration of events is a very well-staffed team of talented individuals who are working on creating PvPvE kind of scenarios where it is a PvE site, but it's designed to be done in such a way that it naturally transitions into PvP. This is one of their active goals for these kinds of things. And that the rats themselves behave closer to maybe not necessarily how players would behave, because we're weird immortal capsuleers, but how those empires would behave, how those real navies would function. And that is part of the cool thing, is that each empire, like the rats bring the weapon systems of that empire, right? So like, as you pointed out, the Sancha's ships have a lot of newt pressure, or not Sancha's, has webs. What am I thinking about? Am I even making sense? Either way, normally they focus on making the rats make sense. So like, you're going to hit the EWAR that you would expect to hit for fighting them. You would run into a tank that you would expect, and damage types that you would expect. Although in general, they have a tendency to spread that out. Like they use missiles that do off types of damage that forces players to omni-tank, because once again, they want to force the PvE players to behave in such a way to make them ready for PvP. So gone are the days of having these like extremely skewed ships that don't fight in PvP whatsoever, because they're perfected for exactly what this rat brings. Rats are designed to bring comps and loadouts that encourage players to build more of the kind of comp that you would see in a PvP environment.
Yeah.
So we will be tracking these things throughout the next year. And as I said, I don't know if we're going to get one in January, but hopefully we'll get, like, as these things come out, we will let you guys know what's going on and how to get into it. But I just mostly wanted to use this as an opportunity to showcase to people, because there's a lot of people that don't realize exactly how much work has gone into the AI PvE encounters and events in general. in EVE for the last year. A lot of people, I hear people asking about CCP providing content for players, but then when I describe things like PvE, they dismiss it because PvE is, not good or whatever. But ultimately, rats are what CCP makes, right? CCP can't make PvP content. They can give us tools, but ultimately CCP makes the environment. Therefore, a CCP solution is going to be a PvE solution. And they use PvE to help teach and to help lure people down the rabbit hole deeper and deeper into EVE Online and create better tracks to get people to get engaged and stay engaged longer in this game, to make them comfortable, to be able to do more and more risky things and hopefully become more and more in need of like reaching out to other groups and other people and getting integrated into the game. So this is probably the year to start paying attention to events and getting involved, especially if you're willing to do it. Like if people are out there looking for something to do as a small gang, 3 to 6 people or whatever, like these things have ended up being pretty consistently great content, great money makers, and great combat opportunities.
I kind of have a question here. POCVen 2021. I imagine the predictions, or is the answer the question?
Well, there's some people asking. Well, we're talking about events of the year. So the formation of POCVen obviously happened this year, but it wasn't an event in the same way as these were events. Like, that was more of a happening. But what POCVen is evolving rapidly, and one of the problems with it is anything you've heard about POCVen is probably out of date because it changes every week almost. So at the same time, it's also not a place where you can easily like go in and just have everything kind of taken care of for you. It really is the place where individuals can put in individual work to see individual progress in there, and then can work with other people that have done the same within that environment. So there are a few people who have gotten to be very successful in POCVen, but these groups have become increasingly insular, and it's not like there's a very good onboarding process. It really boils down to you got to put in the legwork for yourself, which has its pros and cons. And we'll just have to see how it develops over time. But POCVen's here to stay.
I mean, you could theoretically have. By the way, I just realized my mic wasn't working, so that's been fun.
Yay.
So
we weren't ignoring you.
You guys can rewatch the VOD after this and see me trying to speak, and then like looking
just walking over.
Are they're ignoring me? No.
Is that why you turned off your cam? I thought you turned off your cam.
Yeah, well, I was like trying to reset Discord. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to figure it out later. I've just put my old microphone back on. So, but yeah, no, I think there's options. I think the best thing that CCP can do for this game are do make events that make people interact with parts of the game that they wouldn't necessarily interact for shiny skins and that sort of stuff. I think that is that's pretty helpful. I mean, they could even do an industrial event or something like that. I don't know, something weird or wonderful like that, where you have to do something that, like as a PvP player you do that, or as a industrial pilot you do something else. It's cool.
Yeah, I didn't really do much in any event before the Christmas one that just ended. I tried maybe a few sites in an event and then went back to my normal thing. But after this Christmas one, I'll probably be putting a lot more time into future ones.
In terms of Gregorian, what do you think was the thing that drove you to engaging in this one specifically?
It's the main thing that got me engaging with it more was that the filaments made it easier to get to, and so I could just without even having to spend a jump clone, I could just buy a ship in where I staged out of, or actually usually it was a jump freighter, buy it at Jita and have it brought in a jump freighter to my staging area. And then I could within a few hours, just be able to take that ship to spend a whole day, and if I got killed, I could just, before I logged off, buy another, and the jump freighter would get to my staging area before I logged in again.
That's pretty fun. Yeah, I mean, they had it was, to look back at it, you had the ability to jump in and out of different systems, of different areas of space incredibly easily, just through the touch of a button. So you could go from nullsec all the way back to highsec, and which is kind of a little unheard of. With previous filaments, you could go to 0, or you could go to certain areas, but you couldn't really choose to go back to highsec. I think people use these. I imagine they did, for getting ESS bounties back, or I can imagine people using them for industrial uses and all this kind of stuff.
Probably.
Oh, absolutely. I was actually I was surprised that people didn't cry a foul that CCP gave people like an evac device right around the time of this war. But one of the things that was interesting is that one of the winter sites was in solitude, and because it was bound to highsec, that basically meant that it guaranteed that at least one out of every, I think, 6 times that you jumped, you ended up not being in the contiguous highsec.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite parts of the event. Like, I like the highsec islands. Like, I used to have my main area where I lived out of be the highsec island in Placid, which Eve University has a setup there, and I was with them. And I really like those islands that you have to pass through low-sec to get to.
It also gave people a really good opportunity to highlight or see parts of space that they hadn't necessarily seen. Like, one of the storms started out in the New Eden system, which made it so that it stayed in that general area. So a lot of people got to see the Eve Gate for the first time during the event.
Yeah, overall, pretty great success for CCP on the event. I think they got a lot of people getting involved in it, and yeah.
I'm really hoping to see people build teams of people, like get more used to flying and like roaming around, because basically one of the things that always frustrated me is that, like, I'm roaming around in low sec with my small gang, right? Like, I've got 20 or so dudes and we're just kicking around in low sec looking for a fight. And we come across there's a besieged covert research facility. We could go knock that out, but like there's this aversion to doing it. We're doing PvP stuff right now. That's not what we're here to do. And so, like, I think that there's been this space for people like to do cooperative gameplay, to like form a group, and every month or so there is some sort of challenge that's put out, and like it isn't about any given event, but like there's a group of people that whatever the event is, they tackle it. And I'm seeing it emerge more in our alliance, and I look forward to seeing it more in Eve as people A, decide these events are worth doing, and B, start to accept the fact that teamwork trumps just power, because these rats are actually designed to not focus fire. So if you bring 2 or 3 T1 cruisers, each individual T1 cruiser can probably be okay. There may be some like near misses or something like that, or spooky moments if you're not ready. Or you might even lose one, but they're not actually that expensive compared to what you're making. But if you want to solo it, then it needs to be like a really good ship or a fit or whatever. And like, for instance, drone aggro, right? So if you just try to solo it in a rattlesnake or something like that, or your Praxis or whatever, and you launch drones, they will aggress on their drones because their behavior says to switch off of the main target and go to a secondary target, right? Your drones are the only secondary target available, and therefore they get blapped. But if you have friends, then they have other valid secondary targets. So the more people that you have in the fleet, the less likely that the rats will go after drones, and the more safe your drones will be as you fight. And so having a team, I even saw a group of 5 assault frigates being able to do something that requires you can either solo it in a battleship, or do it with a team of like 5 to 6 assault frigates and anywhere else in between. That's what I mean by as long as you build a pretty decent good comp to fight a PvP fight, considering what the rats bring, which is somewhere between 5 to 10 frigates to cruisers, and then the battleship, which is its own special unique consideration. But as long as you can do that, then like there's all kinds of different options that are available, including bringing disruption or logistics wings, both of which we tried.
I mean, I will say it didn't require cooperation. It would be interesting to see some events that required some cooperation and
Right. No, it didn't require. Well, player base really resists requiring something, but as long as it like makes more sense. And this actually happened more than one time because people would be like, "How do I do this?" And I'd be like, "Well, you hack or a battleship," and they're like, "Oh, so it's not really newbie friendly." Well, no, it is newbie friendly, but it's not newbie soloably friendly. Like, if you're an alpha, if you're a new player, go find some freaking friends. Team up on these guys.
Well,
that's the whole point.
It's not easy in Eve, right? Because you don't know who your friends are, especially if you're new.
That's true, but
told.
this is an opportunity for people to build those things because people can work
a lot
together
of people.
on something.
A lot of people who are just starting out have come in with having received the advice to just not trust anyone under any circumstances.
Yeah, you're warned, which is bad. It's kind of poisonous. You come in to an MMO and you're suspicious, and that heightens your, I don't know, like your senses. So it's kind of exciting, but at the same time, if you don't make some connections, you can't really stick around. So
this is what I like to say about this is what's wrong about how we think about EVE Online and retaining new players. When people come into the game, by the time that they're done with the new player experience, at best, all that they know is how much they don't know, and that they'll be punished if they try to do something and make a mistake. And the only thing they know about other people is not to trust anybody. That's the only thing they know about EVE. The only thing they know for sure about the game is that they can't trust anybody because that's what they know about. That's what they've heard about.
But that's not
and
true.
That's not right. But that's what they quote unquote know, right? So that's the point. Where's your path from going from there to being a knowledgeable person? They don't even have the tools to help build their own knowledge base, right? If they don't understand, if there's nothing in the game that helps teach them mechanics, and they've been instilled in them a paranoia of other people and and the information that they have to provide, then you basically just provide people no path forward. And so this is why CCP has put way more information and queues and making things easier in the UI, like telling you what power grade means when it gets overloaded, and how in the show you can now show info pretty much any rat and go to the attributes tab and see the tank and the weapon and the damage type of every rat. So some people are like, "Oh, how do you build? What do you tank for?" Well, you don't even need to even ask that question anymore. You can always just show info on the rat and see what they're doing, and be able to compensate accordingly. So they've been building in the tools for us to like be able to learn the game. The information's, they're getting better at making it so the information is at least accessible within the game. But it's not there yet. Definitely somebody who doesn't know what they're doing doesn't know how to find the information. There's still plenty of hidden stuff within the game. So, being taught by other players is still valuable. But in order for that to function, we need to get past this idea, this stereotype of EVE as psychopath simulator, and all about being villains and all about how terrible we all are.
I mean,
it is fun to be the bad guy, though.
It is, and it's an aspect of it, but it isn't conducive to having players feel like they should reach out. There's already so here's the thing: when you first join a new game, like if you start playing League of Legends, for example, you don't immediately like get through the tutorial and then go try to find some guild or some clan to teach you how to play. The expectation is you will teach yourself how to play, and then once you're at sufficient quality, you will reach out to a group because you feel like you can offer them something. People don't want to join an organization when they don't know what to do because they would feel that is going to be a burden.
Right. They don't want to be a burden. Hold on, let's hammer down that point because it's so important. And there's a new guy in chat here, so he probably can vouch for that. Like, you want to join a team where you can be an equal member, or not equal, but you could be a contributing member. You may not be equal,
value,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
when
And
I
so-
first tried League of Legends, people were so unpleasant to me because I was not sure what to do as a new player that I didn't play it again for years.
Yep. So in the last year, a lot of the things that CCP has been working on is creating events or creating PvE within the game that gives people challenges that require addressing, that teaches defensive behaviors that people should already be doing. Like, for instance, the Triglavians in HiSec. The Triglavians in HiSec basically force players to increase their level of awareness and protect themselves to a certain amount, which is good because they need to be doing that anyways, because it's just in a matter of time they're going to be ganked by a player, if not the Trig. So the behaviors that it takes to defend yourself against the Trig are the exact same behaviors that it takes to defend yourself against players, and therefore that kind of PvE helps cultivate and train the player base to behave in such a way that makes them more successful, or they fail out, one of the two. And then the other thing is like I said, with these events and with really the invasion content, etc., is they're trying to create an environment to run the friendship machine, to give us objectives that encourage cooperative gameplay and resist like multi-boxing or solo solutions as the optimal solution. That ultimately you may be able to do that, but it's still just going to be easier and more fun to do it with a group of people. 3-man frigate abyss, two-man destroyer abyss.
Some of my best
cetera.
moments were incursions. I was relatively new to the game, but I already had a corp and everything, but I kind of wanted to meet new people because it's a big world out there. And I don't know if these 12 people are the guys I want to hang out with for the next 3 years. So I want to meet a whole bunch of people. And Incursions was kind of that public PvE content. You could just kind of show up and somebody would drag you into a group if you were, halfway useful to the group. That's some of the funnest times I had, was trying to get involved with new people. Of course, the voice client was actually in EVE Online at the time. That doesn't exist anymore. So I don't know how if you can still replicate that kind of experience. But to me, it was great because I'm working along with strangers on a task.
We just used a Discord public link, so you could just drop the link in, and then they could just come into the public channel. It worked fine.
I think that it is a difficult thing, again, for new players to figure out their place in the ecosystem or the universe. Okay, like what am I going to add value to? Like, you play any game, any MMO, you're like, I want to be a healer, and that's my value to the group. I'm the healer. I want to be the tank. I want to be the damage dealer. I want to be the crowd control person. Whereas, like, I feel like it's less obvious in this game as to like what are valuable positions, what people want you to be flying, and
Right.
It's hard for new players to find people who want their skills. I think that's one of the hardest things. Like, say I want to be a logistics pilot. I find that idea really interesting. I want to just heal people. I'm not interested in shooting people. But I want to be a part of a cooperative group. How do I find a group of people who will be able to use my my role? And that, I think that's very
Totally.
difficult.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And again, as they create these sites that are designed to emulate real situations in EVE as opposed to old PvE, like Incursions even are still very, like, the solutions that are to the problems in Incursions, and the tactics and the skill set that it takes to be successful in Incursions is not the same skill set as what it takes to be successful in PvP, for example. But that's not true in Invasions. One of the reasons why Invasions Chapter 3 was such a smooth, easy transitions was that the sites themselves were created from Go as being emulating of PvP. And therefore, if PvP was to break out, then it feels like a natural extension of it. It just kind of folds into it. And I think that, honestly, and the reason why I wanted to bring this up today was that at this point, we are the ones, we've started to fall behind as a player base. in understanding and adapting to these changes that have been happening, and understanding how the rats behave. So many people are teaching people still today that you can't newt the rats, like that.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense, right?
Or you couldn't drown them out or something like that. That'd be
Right.
really interesting.
Yeah, and the thing is that so I do agree that there's some of this that is for new players. They're trying to create a track for new players, but to a certain extent, they're almost the lucky ones because they don't have any preconceived notion. The new player comes in and they see whatever it is CCP presents to them. Some of them may not even have an idea that this is a psychopath simulator, and they just think that it's a pretty space game. And so if CCP presents something to them in a good way, they're not going to know any better. That being said, it is cutting through the crust of the decades or years and a decade of our offhanded beliefs about this game, breaking through that and convincing people to think about this game differently than we did based on those changes. This is the big struggle that CCP has had, right? Faction warfare has actually received a lot of love in the last 2 years, but it's been little bits here and there, fixing issues. Like pretty much everything that we asked for in the last rebalance has been implemented into the game that would have fixed faction warfare, but it was done in so piecemeal that nobody really noticed, and people still say that faction warfare is fundamentally broken, even though that's actually maybe not even true anymore. We don't know. Nobody's really tested it since then. But like with these rats and understanding how the rats behave, like at a certain point, we need to update our understanding of the situation in order to get the most out of the sandbox.
I totally agree. But what I would say is that CCP needs to update their PvE content, especially their lower level PvE content, so that it can be you can have these roles that we're talking about where you're like, oh, we're webbing, I'm newting the guy down, this rat down. It can't just be these event sites, because now you have inconsistencies in the game. And when we're talking about like try to teach a dog anything, right? The most important thing that you can do is be consistent about your inputs and what's expected of the situation afterwards. You can't have like one NPC that is newtable and one NPC that's not. That doesn't make any sense. Like, oh, and you're having to now explain to them like, well, actually these are really old rats, and you've got to know the history of the game to understand why these rats can do this and these rats can't do this. And so they need to go from a ground level. And what I would like to see is, I think, what is PvP content really at the end of the day? It's a cooperative group of people who are competing against another group. Now,
yeah, I would fully agree with that. I think that would be the main thing that they have to fix in order to deal with the problems that people frequently bring up about nullsec crabbing.
Could you imagine if you actually, again, back to this point, imagine if you had to, like, if there was like frigate level PvE content in HiSec that you grouped up and did. That would be really interesting, I think, and be great for like new players to like, oh, I'm going to get a logistics frigate and now I'm a healer for my group. And
so what you saw was like the emerging conduits, right? Which this is another aspect of it, where the emerging conduits actually pay out. The maximum payout is 1/3 of the overall pool of the site. So if you actually ran the site with less than 3 people, you were throwing money away. The payout was 4.5 million ISK per person up to 3 people. And then after that, then the total pool was split evenly if you had more than 3. So not only did it encourage teaming up, but it actually actively discouraged not teaming up.
Yeah, when those first came out, that I was living in Eve University's wormhole, and most of what we did for the next few days was groups of 3 remote repair Drekavacs running those sites in the HiSec static.
The issue is that, and this happened in emerging conduits, on a long enough timeline, it becomes a cool thing, and then it becomes a solved thing, and as soon as it becomes a solved thing, then it becomes a botted thing. And there was a huge spike, a sudden spike of botting within emerging conduits 1 week, which required them to take immediate action to take care of it. And so I think that this is one of the reasons why events are the way it is. Like I said,
All right.
2 to 3 weeks is just enough time for us to really get comfortable with this, with how things are going to work, but not be able to exploit it to that full of an extent. Now it's gone.
What a
right?
good
All of our
point.
knowledge about how that works is now gone, and it's time to learn the next thing.
That's a great point. Right. All right.
Each site is similar in a lot of ways, so you can take the same concepts and just apply it, but they're different enough that it requires you to adapt to each individual type of event as time goes on.
Yeah. No, but I never thought
But
of
I
that.
have,
That's
like, I all year I have used this ridiculous vagabond. Actually, let me showcase it real quick.
Sure.
I didn't. It wasn't my main ship in any of these sites. Well, actually, in some of them, but I started in From Wormholes with Love, and this vagabond. It's just kind of an example of the kind of experimentation that you can get into with it when it comes to this sorts of thing. So the vagabond has a shield bonus, like an active shield rep bonus, right? So I really wanted to lean on that. Where is it? Please be here. There we go.
Got all those ships.
And I use this in every single event site, at least one event site that it was authorized to be in the entire year after February, and it survived. And it has a Dreadgaristus extra large shield booster, which means it reps 866 hit points every 4 seconds, and it only has 2,300. So it literally reps a third of its shields every 4 seconds. It lives, and it's gone through a lot of crazy stuff, and it's really exciting and it's fun.
Hey, buddy.
But hey,
Drag him away.
but that's the kind of thing that you can get into when it comes to these sites, and it's really fun.
You didn't even need that though. Like you could go. I had like a fully Tech 2 fit vagabond that I flew these sites with solo. So I mean that was pretty good.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Let's go ahead and end on that. We had other news. This is obviously a Polygon article that came out today. There was a few other wartime things, but we're going to go ahead and yield all that to tomorrow or the next day. Right now is Trash Talk Tuesday. You can check that out on Twitch as well if you want to know more about what's going on with the war from the point of view of the FCs and other popular people. But we are going to raid Carneros, our buddy in the Carneros district. He's they're doing CCP stuff on CCP stream. So thanks very much for hanging out with us for as long as you did. We appreciate you being around. Please join our Discord. That way you can hang out with us all the time. You can always jump in and talk with us in public. We hang out there all the time. And, make Talking in Stations your EVE Online home if you want to. We'll try to help you out. So thanks very much for watching us. We will see you guys tomorrow.
Bye, everyone.